Yeah, there is an echo in your voice.
Still some echo is there?
Yeah,
All good now. Yes, Vijaya, we can start.
Fine, thank you. So very good evening to all. I am Vijayanand Jha and extremely excited and warmly welcome you all, participants and fellow CyberGurukul members for yet another exciting session. This time we will see predict and act the risk-based vulnerability management as strategy. For the same, let me welcome industry veteran and highly respected thought leader, Mr. Sudeep Das. Sudeep has 20 plus years of experience in IT and cybersecurity industry. Currently pre-sales manager at Tenable, India and SAP. Sudeep, we highly excited and looking forward to thought-provoking and insightful session. Welcome, Sudeep. Special credit to Mr. Shankar Sarin, and we will be privileged to hear you in between session and your thoughts as well. For the constant support and encouragement, CyberGurukul core members, I am privileged to welcome Sasank, Satish, Srinivasan, Jagdishwaran, Gaurav, and Anil. Privileged to hear you in between session. Now let me hand over this session to Harsh Kaur. Harsh is the founding member of CyberGurukul and she is going to moderate this session. Harsh, over to you.
Thank you so much, Vijaya. I think Dominic and Rajiv may also join us. So hopefully we have few more co-members as well. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Just to first confirm, I hope I am totally audible and the screen is visible. Okay, perfect.
yes.
Thank you so much. So, well, I do need to first mention, Vijaya, thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. Vijaya is the co-founder and equal pioneer in every aspect of CyberGurukul. So thank you so much for that. And yes, now it is the favorite part of my job here, and that is to introduce CyberGurukul. Take this beautiful opportunity out here. So CyberGurukul, it's the modern Gurukul, where each one of us is a passionate enabler, an ambitious learner, and definitely a cybersecurity enthusiast. We are a fast-growing community, closely knitted together with this mission to become the cybersecurity storytellers and consultants to our stakeholders and community at large. And indeed, we truly believe that by imbibing 360 degrees solution-oriented approach and keeping PPT-centric, people, process, technology, and an analogy-driven format, we can actually get the key to make cybersecurity much more inclusive and palatable. Indeed, the foundation for a much safer cyber world, I must say. And equally, the key as a community to together enable, engage, empower. A very good evening to one and all present here. I'm Harsh Kaur, excited, privileged to welcome all the core members, the extended family, Mr. Shankar Sarin, who has definitely initiated this conversation, and the most important, the hero of the session, Mr. Sudeep Das. Thank you so much, Sudeep, for joining us today. Well, today we are extremely excited to shift this gear, see, predict, act with risk-based vulnerability management. But let me also share you that Sudeep has been a trusted advisor to a lot of its, these government enterprise customer organization in different areas like identity access management, security operations, data protection, IoT security, and I think the list will go on, but the time is limited. Trust me, Sudeep, cybersecurity expert and a accomplished thought leader like you, joining us today definitely matters a lot. Thank you so much for that. And why don't I first hear a few from you before setting the context?
Thank you so much. I almost feel like a hero actually, but believe me, I am as equal a passionate learner and happy to be associated with CyberGurukul and share my knowledge, whatever I have learned from fellow patrons out here. And I really loved the whole concept of getting together to learn together. The Dishum stories are always something that we cyber guys, cyber security guys really love. And I hope it will be a, fun interactive session. And happy to be here, really privileged. Thanks, Harsh. Thanks, Vijay.
Thank you so much, Sudeep. The equal honor is with us as well. And I know we are here to actually get answer to such critical questions like how secure am I? And Sudeep will do the justice there. So let us quickly set the context so that then we can hear out Sudeep as well. That's why we are here for, of course. And this time, let me take the privilege, or rather, let me say it. Let's this time start the session with some flavor of magic and fun. Yes, it's the story time. And like Sudeep mentioned, it has to be fun and interactive. So this is not my part. This is the part of all our creative audience out here. I'm sure, we have heard of the story in our childhood about the three little pigs and the big bad wolf. I'm sure some of us have refreshed also who have younger kids around us. So let's live the magic of this story. And I'm happy to hear out some creative inputs, unleash all your thoughts out here. What do you think is the story here? What does this image depict to you? Well, you can use the chat box, but I would also love to hear some answers vocally. So open to all the audience, including Shankar and Sudeep as well, and the core members. Vijaya, you can also. Yes, Shankar.
I was hoping somebody else would say, but before I forget, and I don't want to bore everybody, but Vijaya, Harsh, Shashankji, Srinivas, the entire team at Cyber Gurukul, thank you so much. Sudeep and I are. It's an honor, and it's so good to be here. And I love the story that you put together, Harsh, and like you mentioned, when you speak to your nephew, in my case, I remember Tenable as an organization, or cybersecurity as a concept, was very difficult for my daughter, who's obviously not too small. But even when I was to make her understand what we do, and she was heavily into fairy tales, so somewhat similar, but being a girl, everything had to be pink, everything had to be those damsels in distress, and I had to give her that analogy. So I remember what I told her probably 3 years back, and I'll still repeat that since you've given me the opportunity of storytelling, but I'll not take more than 2 minutes. So this is what I told her verbatim. I said, like the princess up on the castle, imagine they are our customers who want to get rescued, are in distress, have some issues. The monsters, the witches, are all the vulnerabilities, all the hackers, all the bad things that are happening. And that prince on the horse is like all of us here. We are the ones who are supposed to save the princess, or save her, rescue her from all those vulnerabilities, which are the witches, the monsters, the magical things. So that's what I told her. Luckily, she got it. And now, whenever we hear about, or we read about a hacking attack, both of us have an eye contact. She would smile, and I would smile, and we would just talk about a magical world or a fairy tale world. But yeah, I would say that's my 2 cents on storytelling. But I would want you, Harsh. I think this is a very interesting graphic that you put together. Please just tell us what your thoughts were. I'm sure it's more deeper than my very superficial one.
No, in fact, definitely, hit the nail. I think very, very interesting analogy by you also about the monsters and princes on horse, prince on horse and princes in distress, and how we are, helping our customers to rescue them from the cyber criminals. I think that was an amazing analogy. I would definitely love to share the thoughts on this one. Quite similar, definitely. But let me also, open up to the audience now, and others if they want to add something, maybe some different analogies and stories, the magic of stories this way, or maybe on the image which is here.
Okay, let me try it out.
Please, Satish.
Yeah. See, I think what I can see when it is, see, keep the professional part apart. Okay. It talks about business users, senior management, infosec professionals. Okay. And if you look at today's world, we are continuously attacked with the information. Okay. With various information. You have been called, ask for the information. Okay. So as an infosec professional, or maybe I can say as an experienced person, somebody is helping you to control your in what information to be shared, not to be shared. Senior management is like a parents. Correct. So what they are telling is, don't share information to everybody. Keep something secret. Okay. Protect it. Don't open everything. And business users are like all the users who are actually using the system. Like somebody is using the banking system. We are going online. We are doing the transactions. Right. So if you look at the first picture where Wolf is attacking, is basically the attack from the cyber attacker. So today we are into that kind of threat. Okay, and all these three represent the users. Okay, somebody is with experience, somebody is with a technological experience, and the other are the normal users. So we need to protect them by giving the right information and make them secure. So I think our theme says, are you secure? So every time we need to keep telling them, boss, you are secure, don't worry, but you need to be careful.
Very interesting, Satish. I think definitely some interesting points on the, the different stakeholder with experience and technical experience and the business users. And I really liked, yes, it's totally relevant today because the image of the business and the cyber criminal is what is exactly happening today. So I think, and of course, the right information and the assurance are
Yeah,
very critical. So,
Gaurav, you wanted to say something?
Yes.
Gaurav.
Yeah,
So
please.
let me try something about my imagination. So
Please.
here in first image where I can see the business is always surrounded by the risk and criminals like cyber criminals. So the business users and infosec professionals management is always worrying about the outside world, what is the criminals are trying to impact our business. So it's our prime responsibility to save our business and secure it. So how and what like enable anything we can use and let our business more secure. This image, what I understood, I feel this is the correct story behind this message.
Very much, Gaurav. The how and what to secure against the cyber threat landscape that we are constantly surfaced with is definitely a part of the story and a very critical one. Thank you
Yes,
so
and
much.
Hers, I
Today,
just want
there is
to.
nothing like professional or professional or personal. Everything is digital.
Yeah,
Yes.
So
Hers, I would like to take
since you
this
are
as
working
an
from
story.
home, yeah, since you are working from home, the situation is same.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, so
Definitely.
Hers, this picture shows
Very true.
business as our home, and the cyber criminals are outside. Okay, so it's good that criminals are away from homes or away from business. That should be the thing. And the story goes on. We have heard about the unity. Okay, so I see these three peoples
Yes.
as one unit. Okay, so if we are going to have this bad element or do some strategy of risk-based vulnerability, we have to be together. Okay, and I see infosec professional carrying more burden in this picture. Okay, he is carrying all the stakes to fire. Okay, but all other people are with them. So this is a joint effort, and keep bad guy out of your home. That is the effort of this story.
Definitely. I think amazing input, Vijay. And I think Satish also did cover a bit on this along with you. So yes, the business and cyber criminal business today is because we are work from home. So this is the current scenario, definitely. And you put out a very, very critical point, which I would have come up. And that's the teamwork of business users, senior management, and of course, InfoSec professionals with, of course, higher burden on the high responsibility and stake on cybersecurity professionals. But if well supported by the business user and senior management, of course, the crisis can be averted. So I think very interesting inputs. If we have any other, chat in the chat box, if anyone would want to answer, I can take that up and then continue, or I can directly continue. Vijay, can you check if anything is written in the chat box?
No message yet. Participant, you can put it your queries in the chat box. At the end, also we can have Q&A. So Hers, you may proceed.
Definitely. So thank you for that. And I think really together, Shankar and Vijaya and Satish and Gaurav have covered quite a bit major of whatever I had to say. Half of my job definitely done. Uh, but before that, before actually sharing my thoughts on this, I just thought I had to mention another very critical stakeholder which I could not contain in this image, and that is this one. So this is my little nephew. Let me get you introduced to him. He's Mir Singh, and he is the inspiration behind this whole, image and article. His determination, passion, energy to do dishum to, the big bad wolf and save all of us is something which I definitely admire. And trust me, it's a little difficult for me to come out of this cuteness overload, but yeah, I think let's continue with the story as well now and share the thoughts of here, very much covered by our creative audience. Now, I think two very, very critical, learnings that we can take from this story is one, I think we all have also, kind of experienced this, that the house of bricks, cement, and iron, the importance of this can be realized when the big bad wolf tries to blow it, right? And that's what has happened, especially in last 2 3 years with cyber crimes exponentially growing from organized crimes to a whopping $6 trillion economy in itself. It's becoming so much more sophisticated as well as much more advanced. The business till the senior management, why cybersecurity has no more been a question. How cybersecurity is an enabler to the business is no more a question, right? So that's definitely a learning I think we all will concur with. And at the same time, even with the house of bricks, cement, and iron, there is still that known chimney left out in your business, through which the big bad wolf can enter. But like Vijaya rightly mentioned, the teamwork of the three little pigs and together proactively lighting the fireplace can avert the such kind of a disaster. And that is what has happened also in the story, right? So I think taking these learnings ahead, we are also now, leveraging the experience of Mr. Sudeep, rise above this perfect storm that we are actually bombarded with and the pressing challenges. Some of them, of course, being how do we exactly get the visibility across this rapidly evolving cyber threat landscape? How then can we, actually secure the speed of digitization and its blind spot as well, and continue with the journey to actually transform or have those cornerstones to achieve the predictive and digital risk-based cybersecurity landscape and strategy. So now, without further delay, let me welcome Mr. Sudeep, who will be, helping us deep dive into the what and how of risk-based vulnerability management. And time to break the ice with him. So Sudeep, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Harsh. That was really nice. I think it definitely sets a good context of what really needs, what is the journey that we need to take. So yeah, the topic that I wanted to share with you around security with the vulnerability management into context. And vulnerability management obviously is a program that absolutely no IT system can live without, right? It's almost as base as IT itself, right? So, and I thought I'll just share a few of the things that I have been, learning from my customers and my fellow practitioners, and I'll just try to present that view on that. And I'll try and make it small. And of course, if there are any questions, please feel free. So let me share my screen as we move forward. Okay, here it goes. Okay, host has disabled me from sharing. I need to talk only then.
No. You can share.
All right, there it goes. Yeah. There you go. Thank you so much. I am sharing. I hope you're seeing my screen.
Yes, we can
Right.
see. Thank you.
I hope it doesn't look, I hope this is something that everybody can relate to. I've just tried to put few of the things that we try to, we are all doing vulnerability assessments and management and making sure that we are patched and all. But few of the things that I really see from, what we think, there is still a big, if I cover all my vulnerability system, can I really say that yes, I have covered all my vulnerability in my system? Do I even know if all the vulnerabilities are there or not? The answer most of the time is always a question mark. And so what the first point that I have heard consistently across is that there is a gap in visibility and coverage around vulnerabilities. Right. So that's the first thing that is an issue that is universal. And the vulnerabilities that I get is lines and lines and lines of vulnerability report, right? The kind of vulnerability assessment reports are never it's 1 page, 2 page. It's 10s and 20s and 30s of pages. There is so much vulnerabilities out there that, there's always an overload. I am pretty much sure that most of us cannot have 100% coverage of that vulnerability. Now, once I have that list of 10 and 20 pages of vulnerabilities, I have a high, medium, low risk rating with the vulnerability, but I really don't know whether should I, and I'll try to, talk about why that particular high, medium, low vulnerability is something that really doesn't make much of a sense as far as security is concerned. Right. So to do this, if you look into these three challenges, of course, all the challenges can be built into different ways of depiction. I find this one to be easier for me to think. The gaps, the overload of the vulnerability, and how do I handle these vulnerabilities, right? So I put them under three categories, and those three categories, the way to handle these three categories is those simple three steps that this is the topic, right? I want to see well, and I have so many of these vulnerabilities that I am really not in a going to position to close this. So I will predict and I will find out which are the vulnerabilities that are of importance to me, and I'll go ahead and close them. And is it sufficient or not? And I'll pick those vulnerabilities out. And on those vulnerabilities, I'm going to take certain actions. Now, will those actions be sufficient or not sufficient? I'm going to go ahead and measure that efficacy of that action and see if I can do a feedback into my, into my seeing and acting and so on and so forth. So as I go through, at the end, I will try and see if I continue doing this in a right manner, can I improve on my maturity of handling the vulnerability management program as well. So a risk view so the prediction is basically a risk view, and the action is also a risk view, right? The seeing is everything, right? I hope I have been able to pick up the security challenge in a simple manner. And so please feel free to stop me anytime. Everybody is, allowed to speak. So please feel free to say if I'm, going in any different direction. Chat, I will not be able to see right now. So, if Harsh, you are looking into the chat, let me know if there are any questions that are popping up as we go forward. Right. Right. So let's do a little bit of discussion around this C part of it. What is this C that I'm really talking about? If in 80% of organizations that I have moved into and try to do vulnerability management there, the C part is around IT. Right? I have IT devices which are getting compromised. So I'm talking about the IT base infrastructure that I am doing my vulnerability management. And on that, it is primarily, if you still see, it is not just the,
Sudeep, yeah.
my screen
Yeah.
inadvertently. Yeah. Just this is, yeah.
Report
Okay.
last.
Right. So if I look into, mostly people are moving in the servers. What are my critical servers? And pretty much, and you'll be amazed to see, the number of servers in the smallest and the largest never exceeds around 200, 300, 400 kind of things. Almost everybody starts off with the critical servers. And within those critical servers also, I try to minimize the number of servers that I want to do a vulnerability assessment on. So really, if you look into the C part of it, we are looking into the C only for the critical servers. But we all know the actual malware is sitting out here and then moving on here and trying to attack this guy, right? The infrastructure elements is allowing me to, it is letting me pass. We are doing work from home here, right? And the devices are going out. What about this remote workspace? We know there is a vulnerability out there. And so on and so forth, right? So when we talk about, and of course, the mobile devices, this is a big portion of, do we really know how vulnerable our mobile devices are? Yes, we know they are. I'm patching them almost every other day, automatic patch of Android and iOS. So yes, it is happening, but do I really have a view of that from an enterprise level? So if you start thinking, then you will see that this is a question mark, this is a question, this is not so much of a question mark, maybe. This is a whole bunch of compensatory controls that I have put in place in terms of EDR and antivirus and all of this. Is those going to help me with the vulnerabilities inherent in that remote device, the laptops and desktops? Mobile, I'm leaving it to my the device management system. The office systems, like the IT printers and building management systems and all, what about those? So if you start thinking about it, at this point of time, it really is, if I look into statistically, the percentage of devices that can be potentially hacked, I am doing vulnerability assessment anything between 10 to 15% only, right? Rest of the 85% of devices which actually can become a entry into a hack, we know they are handled, but we really don't have a complete view of it, right? And on top of this infrastructure, of course, there is the whole bunch of, I'm generally putting them as cloud, or I'm talking the app layer. The app layer could be on the cloud or on this thing. So all of these systems, again, are a whole bunch of things which we are doing vulnerability assessments on, maybe not. And they are bringing in a whole new ball game of attack surface, the containers on the cloud, containers within my private cloud. We all know applications and web apps. These two things we know fairly aware. What about the workloads? We are pretty much not sending the workloads out on the cloud at all, thinking that it most probably is a problem, right? So those whole bunch of things, unknowns, if I start looking, there are a big number of unknowns as well as the report on my vulnerability report considered that. Very few vulnerability reports of an organization will have any mention of these things, right? And then we have the other businesses which are running their electronic PLCs and thing, the manufacturing units, which has a whole bunch of electronic devices on which we have very, very, very little. So in short, if I really look into this whole bunch of things, this is the only one which we are very, very focused on as a domain, as a group. The rest of it, we are letting the compensatory controls to take, actions or, right? So please feel free to go ahead and, oppose me in my thing, because many of you are already doing things, but I'm just talking generally. When I talk to people, this is where people focus on as far as vulnerability is concerned. The rest of it is compensatory controls, right? We obviously are handling them, but we are handling them as compensatory controls. Now, even if the next portion of it in seeing is I have identified servers as my target for vulnerability assessment, but are we really seeing everything in this server as the portion of vulnerability one? So that is what I wanted to talk about a little bit more, in terms of the actual vulnerabilities and why it is so important to get the complete range of vulnerabilities, not as a one-time activity every 6 months. If you see the number of vulnerabilities, and you already know this, the number of vulnerabilities on this is just always just increasing again. Somebody told me, again, just nothing against Mr. Pujara, but every time Cheteshwar Pujara makes a run, 2 new critical vulnerabilities are exposed, right? That's the speed with which we are seeing vulnerabilities to be, to be coming out of the wild and letting us know, and we need to handle all those vulnerabilities. And what we are seeing, we are pretty much, if you look into the strategy that we have, anything which is below out here, 0 to 4, pretty much they are for us is info. Just forget them. Anything which is above 7 to 9, this is where we are focusing our analysis on. But if you see, the exploits are also there in the lower vulnerability strings. See, this is the number of exploits. This chart, if I the chart says exploits. Even the low vulnerability or non-critical vulnerabilities has exploits, and they could be the stepping stones towards things. So when I look into the vulnerabilities, do I see vulnerabilities or do I see exploitable vulnerabilities? Or do I see them as something that can be exploited in the future and hence let me patch them, right? So why should I really bother about things? And the other angle, which also comes hand in hand with vulnerabilities, is also the configuration mistakes that one has within an infrastructure. The bad configurations that also can become a real big problem, right? So if we can define the C part of it in a really impactful manner, we will see that we're not really seeing much. We are seeing only a little bit, and that too we are seeing at a very, very long interval, every 6 months, every 1 month, and so on and so forth. And by that time that we saw, it is almost like the sun has emitted a ray and I'm going to see it at 8 minutes later, or a star is 1 billion years away, which means it might have exploded. I'm going to see it only after a while, right? Again, I don't know whether that currently actually makes sense, but that's how I see it. If we are waiting for a vulnerability scan every 1 month, it pretty much is not a thing. So let's go a little deeper as to how do we are doing. Once we have said these are the 5 servers that I want to handle, within that 5 servers also, or within those 500 servers also, what are we and how are we really seeing? And how much of the seeing thing? So the traditional way, if I may use, the traditional way of doing the seeing is put a scanner and I run a remote scan. This is what your assessors will come and you will run a remote scan, right? Sorry about my handwriting. Okay, the doctor's handwriting. So I'm going to do a scan. And as I scan, I'm going to give that person, that auditor, a complete CIDR. And he's going to scan all the IP addresses in that range. And in that range, he might go ahead and find out new systems in place. And every systems he will do his fingerprinting, etc., right? Rarely are we giving him enough information to find out all the vulnerabilities, which means we are not giving this guy enough enough privileges to run these scans. And those insiders, people who are privileged, can they see more vulnerabilities? Actually, yes. And so if I give them credentials to work with, right, then we will see more. And this part of credentials, we normally are not giving it because it's very difficult to give credential for each and every system and let them do the scan and see what is there, what are the vulnerabilities. So the first remote scan gives me a bunch of vulnerabilities. If I give credentials to that same guy, he will find out even more number of vulnerabilities, right? And then there are a whole bunch of other systems. Sorry about that. Then whole bunch of other systems, this guy cannot scan because it is behind a firewall, it is hardened. So there are systems which cannot be remotely accessed. So for this guy who is scanning, he wouldn't even know that there is a server out here, right? These are hardened systems. These are systems which doesn't have a network path. So vulnerabilities of these systems, remotely it's not possible. So many a times we just, we let them go. Then there are systems which is not part of my CIDR range that I have given him, but they are there. So what we could possibly also look into is, okay, so before jumping into that, so we could do credential remote scan, and we can actually put a scanner within the system, which we normally say as agents, scanning agents, right? We could put the scanning agents and they will do the scan within there and send it out. Remote desktops, think about it. I cannot scan them where they are in the home. They can have agents sitting there and doing the vulnerability analysis from within the system, right? And this scan report could come to the central position. These agents could talk to this central position. And am I still seeing all the systems out there? There might be systems which are coming up right now. What do I do with those systems? I don't know what is the vulnerability of that system that got introduced now, right after the last scan that I did. So if I actually go ahead and monitor the traffic that is going out here and put a passive scanner, which we call as a passive scanner, then we could go ahead and things. Yeah, Vijay, sorry, I hope I'm...
Yes, you are in the flow. Pawan has put in some inputs like install VM agents. So these Pawan, you wanted to add what Sandeep, sorry.
Sudeep, sorry, yeah.
I'm totally agree with Sudeep.
Okay. So Sudeep, I just want to second that we want to scan just to safeguard my data or customer. At the same time, you rightly pointed out that this scanning doesn't have much of the privilege. Okay. And people who are privileged are scared that due to scanning, my customer will get impacted. So I have one hand, I want to safeguard my customer data, and to do that, we are doing the scanning, and other side, we are not giving privilege. So this is a doubt which we carry on the security system or the process which we adopt, because business is not very confident. So what is your thought on this?
One fundamental thing, about this, we are a blue team. We are not a red team. We are not an outsider. People who are doing vulnerability management of the infrastructure are part of the blue team, right? So if we don't consider them as blue team, we'll not give them privileges to scan. We'll not give them enough power to scan. The red team exercise is different. This is blue teaming exercise, then we can start thinking a little differently. Sorry, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Other than the server, I think we must scan all the devices as well, like network switches, the firewalls, the other kind of assets that we have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We should do this. We should do our routers. We should do our scan our, every bit of system which is talking over the network. Each one of them is an entry point to, and each one of them has vulnerabilities, right? So not just the servers, but that is where we can, I was about to talk about the office LAN, the systems which are sitting on the office LAN, which may not be that critical, but also is critical. We need to have scanners everywhere. Scan all of them, scan the testing systems, scan them.
Even the printers as well.
Absolutely, the printers. There was so much, halla gulla around the printers being compromised. The cameras getting compromised. And tomorrow you will hear the coffee filter is also getting compromised, as well as the refrigerator getting compromised in my office, right? And that's not too far away. It is just going to happen very, very soon.
That's more because of the IoT kind of facility.
Correct.
So you are trying to capture everything from every machine. And that is creating a new challenge for us.
Very true.
And
very true.
You try to put more and more controls, I think this becomes more and more vulnerable.
Yeah, it's a self-propelling overload of things that is going to continue to happen. But the problem is we shouldn't be afraid of that overload, because the seeing part of it, at least I should know what all are vulnerable in my environment. Today it cannot be transferred. The risk cannot be transferred without even knowing what the risk is. At this point of time, we're basically ignoring, right?
So awareness is key. So making people awareness is key.
And
this
that
is
awareness will
which you
come
can-
when you are able to see everything. See, if you don't see and you write down everything, it is not going to give that view. Awareness also will be incomplete, right?
Correct.
So that is why I so much emphasize, if you don't know what you don't know, we are in a bad state. So the very first step of any risk-based approach is to know, is it complete or not, right? So
We
yeah.
actually have one more query as well from Abhishek. Abhishek, would you like to unmute yourself and also ask the question?
Thank you very much. I actually wanted to hold this question till the end. Probably you'll be covering it in your presentation. But of late, even Gartner is saying that perimeter level of security is diminishing, and there are a lot of collaborations happening where uh, partner data is collaborating, and other data, partner networks are collaborating, applications are talking. So, as I said, perimeter is diminishing. To which level of scanning should happen? Because of, right, most of the offices are running from mobile phones these days, then a laptop or a closed environment or a known environment, and mobile phones are connecting to GPRS or the VoLTE network these days. That's I just wanted to make a kind of comments here.
Has to be 100% coverage, because one weak link is going to compromise everything. We know that. So there is no, there is no two thoughts about the fact that, do I need to work on the cloud, the workloads on the cloud, workloads on the internet, right? Work from home. Everything has privilege to my data. So data is sitting everywhere, and this is what everybody is after, right? This data is sitting here. It is sitting here. It is sitting here. It is sitting everywhere. So wherever the data is, I have to make sure that that infrastructure is thing. There is still a lot of data behind the firewalls. So those will be stored. The outside the firewalls, the perimeter is diminished. The data is sitting out here. That needs to be monitored. There is no, two thoughts that everything needs to come onto my environment for vulnerability management. Right? Absolutely, it has to be. The scanning system should be able to do my mobile devices, and that is why I will come next, which I'll come is the SCADA systems, right? For all of you who are running OT systems, IT systems we talked about. What about the OT systems? That there is life and death, which is happening on the OT side. A power plant, a water treatment system, they're all connected. And what about the security of those OT systems, the vulnerability on those OT systems, right? The other part of vulnerability, which I would like to, I'm taking too much time on the C part, but it's important. So the other part of the thing is that once you have finished all this infrastructure level, we also talked about the next level of apps that are doing. So if let's say I'm running a web app out here, a web application. Am I going to do the same kind of scanning as I have done here? No. There is, for web app, I have a very special kind of scanning which moves on OASP, right? Then there are, if you see, one of the things that we have identified as every malware, almost 99% of malware goes after a user ID password, because if you get privileged access, after that, you don't have to hack, right? Then you can just go normal. So they go after AD. Active Directory. So once I have done all my compromises, I'll go after my Active Directory and get super privileges. The ability, the way we do Active Directory configuration checks are very different. So is containers. So is infrastructure as code constructs, and ... You can go on. Each one of them has different ways of finding out what is the configuration problem there, what is the vulnerability problem there. So we are talking about vulnerabilities, and we are talking about configurations. Both of these are something that we need to be able to find out as part of my vulnerability assessment systems. So the OT part, I'm just going to keep it at that, because this we feel is super critical, because this is also around safety, right? Our PLCs and our HMIs and our all those factory things that is out there, they're not air gapped. They are over the WAN, and they are being a big target of whatever we are trying to compromise out here. Right. So I think I've delved, enough on the seeing part of it. I know, I'm pretty sure you have got a gist of what I'm trying to say. And Pawan and Abhishek also already asked those questions that, do I need to see all? Absolutely. There's no two doubts about it that I need to see all. 1 week link, the whole program goes for a toss, right? Now that I have this whole bunch of things with me, I have seen everything, and I've got all the vulnerabilities across all the systems and all the configuration issues. I will have such a massive, massive number of systems to work on. That's not going to work out. So what, I earlier only talked about it. So what we normally do is we try to talk about what are the most important ones and work only on those most important ones. That's going to leave out a whole bunch of vulnerabilities that we know of, but not acting on. If you look into the target issue, the alerts were there, but those alerts had been disregarded, but this because there were info, they were medium things. But those slowly became super critical and brought down the whole target infrastructure, and the CEO, of course, along with it, right? So we need to come up with an idea of how I need to have my analysis in place so that I know I am able to handle the vulnerabilities in a predictable manner. I'm able to handle the vulnerabilities before it gets exploited, right? So I have to pick and choose. I have to bring in that risk factor on the vulnerability as well as on the asset, right? So on the vulnerability piece, what we have done, what the research that we see is that if I can handle, again, this is a part of the research we have published, if I can handle the top 3% of vulnerabilities in my organization, it will have 97% reduction in my risk. Again, there are risk calculations that we have done, which shows us that it is empirically true that if I can target on the top 3%, I am going to be safe, relatively more safe, right? With a smaller workload. Right now, if you look into the previous previous one, this is 50% of vulnerabilities. Imagine that. 7 and above is actually 50%, and the rest is also 50%. So when I actually do a vulnerability program around only the high and medium, I'm basically doing everything. Compare this 50% to 3% that I'm trying to talk about here. It is a much better better step, right? The other part of the thing is, which we always need to be thinking about, is the criticality of the asset also is a critical element. It is not just this vulnerability that is important, but also this asset, where it is sitting. How many points of compromise? Is there a database running on it? Is there a SMTP running on it? Is there NetBIOS open on it? The number of vulnerable points which are there. What is the business impact of it? If I take all of these, then I get the asset criticality value. Now, if I have to go ahead and say that I will wait for my risk management team to come and say, what is the criticality of the asset? Almost every time we have seen this data keeps on changing, it is outdated. So just like the vulnerability priority, which is, which needs to be automated, which is automated, the priority of vulnerability, you take up the asset criticality, which is again needs to be automated in place, changed as systems change. You add these two things up, and then you can be able to say that you can predict, right? So what we have seen is that as part of our analysis, there are 3 data points. Apart from these 2, there are other data points that we need to be taking into consideration. a vulnerability stays in our system on an average of what, 200, 300 days as the maximum. And the latest one, maybe a few days, right? But those vulnerabilities which are sitting out there comes up with a new exploit, it can become problem. So the first thing that we need to be able to look into is threat intelligence. Is this vulnerability getting enough attention from the malware producers? If it is, it becomes more critical. The next I talked about was the asset criticality, that part. And the part of it is, which we have to be able to do from a predict perspective, is there a possibility that it is going to get exploited? So instead of just remaining proactive, we have to become predictive in nature. Because proactive, I will still miss my bus because I just don't have enough time to remediate. Now I have to be able to be predict based upon a CVSS that has been, thing, and then work on that quickly. Again, I'm taking, I hope I'm putting some thoughts around, that you can delve more into and see how it can make sense into introducing into your overall things. Now let's assume that we have got all the risks, we have got all the things, we have to be able to act upon it. So the first thing that we say is that put those the governance processes in place, the risk values in place, and focus on what is your compliance, what is your internal requirement. So the data that has come from our vulnerability assessment reports, that 60-page report, you need to be able to translate it into a GRC action item. I need to be able to assign a risk. I should be able to assign a governance process around it, which means which vulnerabilities I'm going to handle first, which is later, which can be remediated, which should be, etc., right? We should be able to, so that I'm compliant to my overall security process. And to do that, we need to be able to leverage the ecosystem of the organization. The two most important things that we see our customers to really work on, the first thing is create ticket on my ticketing system. So every time I get a vulnerability assessment, I break up the actionables into multiple tickets. These are the guys that the server Linux team has to do. These are the Windows team. This is the web server teams. This is the SAP teams. This is the Oracle team. Break it up into different tickets because they know they're already doing all of those server management things. Send it out to them, right? The other option is if you have, more confidence around certain, the patch management process, you could actually also send it directly to the patch management system and let the patch management go ahead and take care of the most critical patches in your organization. Maybe not just the top 3%, but maybe the top 1% of your critical things. Send it to the patch management, make it automatic, right? There are other systems on which you can make it automatic. I am not able to patch them. Can I send it to my virtual patching system, like my EDRs of the world? Can I send it to my NAC? Can I block it at the firewall? Can I let the SIM handle it? Can I have my threat intelligence guys, have a look that these are the systems which are vulnerable to it, etc. Right? Do the SecOps piece of it. So this is again things that we could do. Use cases, hundreds of use cases are there. Sorry, I'm over exaggerating. There are many use cases that allows this vulnerability data to be used by my ecosystem to do remediation controls, right? And of course, these data will feed into the larger GRC ecosystem that you have, which goes up all the way to your board, right? How secure am I? I am solving a portion of this how secure am I question mark here. That is part of the larger how secure am I question that you handle across all the other things that are there, identity management, data protection, etc., right? So I'll keep about that act part of stuff from a vulnerability perspective into it. And lastly, before I sign off, I want to just give a little thought around all these things as we do that process that we do. There are levels of maturity that one can think of. The level of maturity is not just as a whole vulnerability management, but also at different levels. How well am I discovering? How well am I assessing? We talked about remote scan, credential scan, agent-based scan, IoT scan, AD scan, etc., right? What is the level of maturity? How am I well prioritizing? How well am I remediating, and how well am I measuring? Right? The ultimate of measurement is risk transference, right? I will not be able to do much, but this is where, based upon the business requirement and the business values and the measure of my vulnerabilities, I most probably will be able to address this. And each of these blocks you could start thinking. For example, assess. If I am here, I'll be most probably doing real-time assessment, right? If I'm doing here, it is going to be a business-driven business-driven assessment. So your DevOps people most probably will do the development team most probably will be doing the assessment. Yesterday, one of my banking clients told me, I want to do an assessment of those third-party guys who are connected to me, not just my own infrastructure, but also those because if they are compromised, there is a chance I'll get compromised, right? So the level of maturity can always be going forward as we move forward. And that would be the last, the last slide that I had to share. I hope, I know I'm already over time.
Not at all. We always request our audience to keep book till 5:15 because we don't want that anything which is critical, creative, or important gets missed out. Sudeep, can you go back to the X slide? We have Abhishek requesting for that. I think he has some query out here, and few more queries already has come up, so we'll take that up.
Which slide?
The previous one, Act slide.
Okay.
Yes.
I love this slide. Yeah.
I love this slide. This is a very good explanation. Thank you very much. So what's your idea of this is said it's a vulnerability list, and then you have the GRC act there, and then patch management, virtual patching. That's a doable thing. But when it comes to the fourth part, GRC, what does exactly mean about it? You know.
Oh, GRC as a see this one, the way I talk about, sorry.
Did I lost?
This is
Hello?
no, okay. I need to get my pen back. I'm not getting my pen back. Right. Okay. Let me strike this out. It is a little confusing. This is measurements. Okay. So how many high critical vulnerabilities across critical servers of mine? How many critical servers have not been handled in the last 7 days? So those kind of measurements, right? So the vulnerability management program should give me those kind of measurements, and based upon those measurements, I can create the correct ticket. Now, this GRC is more in terms of the security policy of your organization, the vendor risk management of your organization, incident management, etc., etc. So this becomes a feed into your other security processes within your organization. And each one of them would like to see the risk of the underlying infrastructure. So that is this link. I hope I've able to explain what I meant to say of GRC here. This is basically measure and benchmark.
All right, thank you very much. Because I saw GRC on the right side. I said, well, if it's still GRC, then how different it is. But now you clarified. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is GRC for VM, focused on VM. I loosely use the word GRC. Sorry for getting things confused here. So this is basically measurement.
We also had a query from Vishwas a few minutes back. Vishwas, would you like to take that up?
Yeah. Hello. Thank you. It was nice presentation. My query is related to the shadow IT. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my query is related to the shadow IT because nowadays every business is coming with the cloud-based solutions, which is managed by the vendor, and we have visibility what going on the cloud. But the problem is whether they are cover the entire aspects of the vulnerability management or not. That is something it is always creating a confusion, because sometimes they are coming up with the new functionality which we are not aware, or our technology team is not aware, and all of a sudden we identify, okay, that new functionality or that new component have some vulnerabilities which needs to be patched, but unfortunately, or without our knowledge, they have implemented, and it is running in the business. And if we ask them to shut down that things, or if we ask them to patch that thing, it will create a huge voice in the management why you want this kind of actions. So my query is, how to handle that kind of scenario, and what is the recommendation we can provide to management or to our partners to manage that things properly.
Yeah, so no straightforward answer to that, but base answer is a straightforward thing, right? So shadow IT, yes, you have to be handling it. You have to discover the shadow IT, and there are various ways and means of discovering that shadow IT through the network passive control. If there is any transaction that is going on between a service provider on like a HRMS system on the, as part of shadow IT, right? Somebody just started a marketing campaign. They're going to talk to your environment as well. There is going to be network traffic, and if you remember in this this previous slide, I talked about passive scanning, which allows me to. Sorry, this one, right? So this passive part which I had written here, I can find out shadow IT usage just by doing passive scanning, right? If I do passive scanning or discovery scanning, I'm able to find out. And again, I cannot be 100% thing, but mostly whatever use cases I have dealt with, we have been able to pick up the shadow IT usage. Now, once I have picked up the shadow IT usage, then comes the part where the action, of course, you will do whether that shadow IT usage is risky, not risky, etc. You will do your assessment at this layer. And once you have done the assessment at this layer, this is where you will go ahead. And so let me just add up an extra bit of thing here. Let's say this is where you will be doing your CSPM, CASB, or identity management, log management, and so on and so forth. So you will go ahead and put compensatory controls to make sure that you're monitoring and doing things. So you will, from the vulnerability perspective, you will find out whether the system that I'm using is vulnerable. You'll put your metrics around it and say, yes, I need to handle it. Then you will use the different remediation control, which is available in the market today, to go ahead and safeguard yourself from this. Of course, these are all incomplete controls in themselves. I'm just giving a base answer. It's an idea of what we have seen customers to do.
Just an extension to this question, to this response. How do you get the shadow IT discovered when you just said?
Okay, what I said was I monitor the traffic, not only traffic at the endpoint level, at the server level, at the thing. So if you are using shadow, okay, what I try to say, if you are using shadow IT, it means you are communicating with that shadow IT. Without communicating with that shadow IT, you will not be able to use it, right? So what we say is that if I can monitor the usage of what all resources I am using as a corporate user, and if the usage is extending beyond my known systems, then this is most probably a part of my shadow IT systems.
Yeah, because if you really look at with this SaaS coming forward, I think more than 50% of the applications are no more hosted in the organization, whether it is on-prem or even in the organization subscribed cloud as well. So you will see that coming out from Fusion, Oracle Fusions, or you'll see all those HRMS coming outside the totally different world.
Yes. Yeah, and the point, why we don't really want to do shadow IT, it is because we want to go the shadow IT space is because the ability to integrate into our corporate structure is so difficult. Let's say I want to use my employee ID to log on to a particular HRMS. That integration itself is so difficult that I rather just go ahead and use it directly, bypassing my corporate policies, right? That is when it actually becomes shadow ID. But if the seamless integration can happen where we have such, multiple security controls that can actually help me use the corporate security policies for that shadow IT, if those usages become more prevalent and people are more aware that you don't have to run them as shadow IT, you can become a normal SaaS solution for your corporate, I think life will become easier. But before that, the usage will happen. I will pick up the logs, I will pick up the network traffic, and I will know. Again, that's not a pure vulnerability management discovery program, but it, of course, will need support from the other cloud discovery solutions, which will have to complement the vulnerability management program. Right? For example, if you're using AWS and all, they have APIs that can help me just discover what all are being used by a particular organization. The catalog is all available, right? So there are ways and means by which those discovery can happen, but it's heartening to know that you're thinking, yes, I need to discover my shadow IT. That need, if it is there, the solution will automatically come. Not automatically, most probably come. Let's say, put it in that manner.
Interesting. We actually have few more queries, and let's try to take all of them. Pawan, I think you wanted to add or ask something, and then we can go to Milin's questions.
No, thanks.
All right. Milind, I think you had a question.
Yes. Hi, Sudipja. Milind here from Altisource. Thank you for this wonderful session once again. My query is based on risk. I understand that you were very specific about risk being identified, and you spoke about multiple vulnerabilities here. We were not speaking about just one server related vulnerability. The vulnerabilities can be application, server, API, and so on. You covered all the assets, and that is why the risk based in general vulnerability management, right? So how do we, or what is it your recommendation for calculating the risk on what basis? Because if it is only server, then the CV or the severity would suffice. But since we are talking about application, server, source code, or any other vulnerabilities in general, so what is the risk matrix, and what tool would you guide for the for risk calculation?
Okay, if what tool, if you ask the answer, what tool should be?
No,
okay.
I mean not the tool. I'm sorry. So tool as in not as in vendor, tool as in like a toolkit that we generally refer to as any framework or a program for managing the risk or calculating the risk. Any risk metrics that you would.
Yeah. So see, there is no straight answer to this today. The one which is most prevalent and it is all available out there is CVSS, right? That's the metrics risk value that we all know about.
Okay.
And this is universally understood. Now this CVSS, on the CVSS, you have to add up things like what is the criticality of the application? What is the criticality of that asset? What is the configuration status of that system, right? What is the, so we have identified close to 15 odd such parameters which will be needed.
So whether the exploit is available or not.
Whether the exploitability, exactly, exploitability of the system. How many malware is using this exploit? Even that becomes very important, whether my domain is getting targeted with this vulnerability or not.
Correct. Whether it's internet facing or it's within
internet facing or not. Yes. According to our this thing, there are close to almost 15 to 30 different parameters that goes into my machine learning algorithm. So today the algorithm that we use to do it is reading a whole bunch of parameters and coming up with, okay, Harsh, please excuse me, but I will use that word. It seems very the exposure score. Right. See, at the end of the day, we want to come out as to what is my level of exposure.
Okay.
Right. And that is what, so vulnerability, and that is the reason why I put the word GRC, because the governance part is not just about numbers, but there is a whole governance aspect of vulnerability that needs to come into picture.
Yes.
Am I meeting my SLAs? Am I doing my scans regularly? Am I meeting my remediation requirements? Am I seeing a vulnerability come back again and again? Right? Things like CSPM, where I am, CSPM, the Cloud Security Posture Management, I go ahead and correct the posture, but the developer will go ahead and write his own code and change the posture next time the build is happening. Right? So whatever the security guy is trying to do a virtual patching here, the developer is reintroducing because he doesn't know that he is introducing a vulnerability. So we need to go there. The governance aspect has to go all the way to the developer, not to write bad code. How do you not write bad code? Right? Yeah. So the part of risk calculation is a very, very vast subject, and the top risk things that we normally talk about is exactly this one: exploitability. It is exposed over the internet or not? Is there a configuration problem or not? Is it an application level problem or not? And the asset criticality, right? So these are the things. And the lastly, which is important, is it getting exploited now? What is the status as of today? You know,
Legacy application is another problem now.
oh, that's a Pandora's box. That's the Pandora's box. The OT is where we see that even more. And the OT is the OT environment, the manufacturing units. There's a mix of 25-year-old systems and 1-year-old systems, all in the same environment. Yeah, the availability of patch is a huge problem. I have still Windows 7 machines running in IT networks because the applications, the legacy systems needs Windows 7. What do I do with them? There's no other option but to do a virtual patching of those systems, right? And we do, of course, we do take that as the right approach for remediation.
I think for OT security, we'll have to call Sudeep once again. That's a very extensive discussion altogether. I think we have two more queries, one from Abhishek and Vishwas. We'll quickly take them. We will be extending our extended time also, but I think at CyberGurukul, we never want to, stop these interesting discussions. So Abhishek, quickly to you, and then Vishwas, then we should wrap it up. Please.
Thank you very much. Often games like football and hockey, I get that extra time and then extra time also has extra time. Thank you very much for including my question here. One question is about that maker and checker thing. How generally the industry is looking? Uh, is it the same set of teams which are doing C and same set of people who are acting upon those findings, or they are the segregated teams? That seeing and acting are different teams. And this is out of your slides. The terms
This
which
is
I
Mecca
see
or checker or something. No, this is checker. Sorry. This is the checker, CHECK, and this is the maker. It needs to be two different teams. It cannot be the same thing. I can give you the whole list of vulnerabilities, whether it is applicable, not applicable, it is following my patching cycle or not cycle. I can only give you all the data in a palatable manner, in an actionable manner. Action has to be taken by a different team. It cannot be. And that is why we almost always say, whatever data I'm getting here from a check perspective, send it to a ticketing system, because that is where you can go ahead and have the right workflows in place. Many of those workflows can be automated. Not that you don't want to, you want to put some maker. The maker could be a robot also. I mean, a logic as well. But as long as these two things, the maker checker concept cannot be ignored in vulnerability remediations, it is going to be a disastrous thing, because that is going to get exploited by the hackers.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Vishwas, the last query from your side.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to accommodate my query. So my query is because that is the common perception which I personally feel that if you have an effective vulnerability management program, it is also satisfy your hardening requirement. But from your point of view, whether hardening, if I'm using a effective vulnerability management program, whether it will address my hardening requirement or patching requirement, or it should be a different, or we should also have a effective hardening and patching um, program in place.
No, see, your patching and hardening, these are your systems that you have put in place while you are building it. You are making this part. VM is to check whether you are patching, hardening correctly. VM is to check whether you are patching correctly. Because when I see a vulnerability, that basically means you have not patched it. So a VM program is the checker. This is the assessor, right? So I will be able to tell you. So you go ahead and say that I want to put CIS benchmarks.
Correct.
On my Windows system. The team will do it. This program will go ahead and check, have you done it? Have you missed something? Are you breaking something? Yes. Here is the remediation. Please go ahead and. So the compliance to your program that you have written here, this is your security controls that you have decided to put in place. VM programs work is to assess whether those programs are running the way it should be running.
Correct, because in my in my tenure, I experienced when we deals with our vendors and when we ask them to demonstrate their hardening posture of the system which our organization will use, they simply present the vulnerability report
Yes,
and
yeah. This is the one. This is the, see again, this assessment, as I told you, this is a blue team. Think
yes,
about it. This is not the red team. So the hardening team absolutely should use this data to say I am compliant, because here I'm doing the check to say I'm good. The same system will use the VM. Everybody will use the VM as their own team. This is not a third party team. It is their own team. So absolutely the hardening team should go ahead and use the vulnerability report to provide the evidence that yes, I've done it good.
okay. Thank you.
There
Thank
is
you
a
for
separation. So there is a separation of duties. Definitely it is a separation of duties, but this is still a part of the team, right?
all right. So vulnerability management program gives the fair amount of input for the hardening and patching also.
Absolutely. I need to be told. For example, I have done CIS and the VM team goes ahead and does CIS too. And I give a whole bunch of reports to you. What will you do? You know, these two teams has to be in sync. Right? Absolutely, they have to be in sync.
Because multiple organization runs their hardening checks program also, where they do the periodic checks for the hardening, especially because a part of vulnerability management. So so somewhere it creates additional efforts also, like to check the hardening.
Yeah. So for example, I'll give you one example. We had was talking to an AD team. Okay. The AD team was doing their own security using Microsoft services and all, they were doing it. Then we went ahead and showed them, these are the 123 attacks that can happen on AD. I said, oh, 123 attacks. Who told you so? The MITRE framework has already identified this. They incorporated it and they used the vulnerability management system to say, yes, I am safeguarded against this 123 tools and tactics that MITRE has already identified. That's the collaboration between the VM team and the server application, DevOps, cloud teams.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your input.
Welcome.
Thank you, Sudeep. Hers, we are at the end of the session, but extra time bring more goals. I can underline this.
Very much. And I must say, amazing comprehensive insights by Sudeep. And I mean, I really loved the session, especially how we, step by step went into every aspect of see, predict, and act. And Before actually, sharing my, takeaways out here, I think I need to give a special appreciation to all the core members and participants here who have joined us today, especially to Gaurav, Vijaya, Satish, Shankar, Pawan, Abhishek, Vishwas, Milin, and Kiran. And I hope I did not miss anyone who had been highly participative. And I think I did put down some key takeaways, although there are so many, but yeah, let me just take a minute to also cover that. I think it was definitely a very interesting session to first, step by step, see the gaps in the visibility and the coverage, not only across your IT landscape, that is your corporate BYOD devices or the remote workspace, which by the way currently is just giving you 15% view. We also, could get the risk-based VM as an approach to get the complete visibility, the range of vulnerabilities across your private, public, cloud, app workloads, OT environment, and also understand vulnerabilities versus the exploitable vulnerabilities, which is the key, not only constantly, but also as an insider, because otherwise the business confidence on getting the visibility into our assets is definitely a challenge, as a blue teaming rightly said by Sudeep. And also get the misconfigurations, for example, across AD, OT, infra as a code, etc. Uh, Definitely, we have been ignoring with the lack of confidence that we have on outsiders, but we cannot ignore more. It's time to get aware so that we can then predict and act as well. Predict in terms of predicting the vulnerability and the information overload. It was great to understand the whole, the risk metrics, the critical factors like the criticality of asset, the risk factor that you should allocate to the vulnerabilities, the business impact it can create, the vulnerabilities that have the heavy attention by the malware producers, that is the threat intelligence. And so we do not miss the bus. We have to now really, it's the need of the hour not to just be proactive, but be predictive. And a surprising fact for me as well, if we target 3% of the vulnerabilities, we are covering 97% of the attack surface. So definitely how we have to prioritize vulnerabilities is equally critical, so that we can do our third step, act on assessing the cybersecurity risk, or like Sudeep mentioned, those 60-page report of the GRC. And yes, it's equally critical to team up, for example, with ITSM, break into those smaller actionables to achieve your goals, patch management so that you may be able to also automate those critical 1% patches, and much more by teaming up with also NAC, Firewall, SIM, and others. I think we had some very interesting discussion also on shadow IT and the critical other aspects brought out by our wonderful audience. Pretty interactive session, and I think today we definitely have got those cornerstones to actually see, predict, act with risk-based vulnerability management. And Sudeep, you have been our anchor here, and thank you so much. Wonderful insights, truly.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this platform, Arsh. It was really nice being here.
The privilege was all ours. Thank you so much. Thank you,
you.
everyone. We'll join soon for the next session next month. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.